Are you okay? It's like, your mental health okay? And I was actually thriving at that time. I was starting to feel better every day. As they were asking me every day if I was getting worse, I was actually feeling better every single day. My name is Adnan Alkhalili. I'm a 20-year-old that is currently having recovered from OCD, anxiety, and some other conditions along with that. I had started a journey along metabolic health while in high school, maybe the beginning of high school in my freshman year, when I was severely overweight. I had eaten basically everything that my school had to offer, and also just really the average diet. I would just constantly uh, go to those foods. I would go to them because I craved them, or I would go to them just because those are the things that we're comfortable eating, based on how long we've been eating them. And because of those foods, and because of not only the foods but also my lifestyle, where I was very sedentary. I didn't grow up really. I grew up around sports, but not constantly playing sports. And even if I did play a sport, it would always be along with other parts of my life that were also out of balance, which includes the eating, but also includes waking up in the morning and getting directly into a car, never seeing sunlight, and things like that, which is very common for young people today. And so when I had reached high school, I had very little going on in my life that would make an ordinary child turn into somebody with anxiety and OCD. I lived very, very happy. I'm very fortunate that I had so many things in my life that I was blessed with. And despite that, and despite all of that, I still ended up with very severe anxiety in my freshman year of high school. And around this time, I didn't really see others experiencing anxiety in my school. And mostly I had realized at the time that maybe not everybody was sharing that they were experiencing anxiety, but I had anxiety, and so that would take me out of school every single day. I would constantly go to the principal's office, because I was experiencing anxiety. I would go to my parents, call my parents up, and my mom, who obviously every mother's like this, but she was freaking out seeing my condition, because I would have panic attacks nearly every day. I was constantly aware of my breath, so like a normal child who's sitting in class and listening to the teacher, I was sitting in class and trying to listen to my breath to see if I was still breathing. And of course, a lot of the time when people hear anxiety, they think it's just, you're anxious about things going on in your life. It wasn't even that for me. It was very symptomatic. I was feeling things in my body that I didn't feel were normal. I would end up going to the hospital very, very often, just feeling that, my chest feels weird, or, some part of my body feels weird. So I would just make up a bunch of conditions, and I end up going to the doctor, and they would just tell me, maybe it is anxiety, and that's it. So, I mean, that wouldn't make me feel better, but I would go home and have the next thing come up. And interestingly, when I would feel those conditions, and the doctor tells me it's fine, I would actually go home and the next day it would be fine. And so the cycle would repeat every single time. I would also have really weird rituals that I would complete. So, for example, when I would go into my room, I would close the door and I would hold the knob and like close it in a certain way. And I would see my mom on the corner of my eye just looking at me weirdly. And it was a very, very sad thing as a child, because you're realizing that, like, okay, this is like, I don't know why I have to do this, because in my mind I'm thinking, if I don't do this, like, something bad will happen. I don't know what that bad thing is. Just I know that there's nothing bad that will happen. It's just I would still feel something bad would happen. And so very, very typical signs of anxiety. And I would went to a therapist and a psychiatrist who told me it was OCD. Um, Luckily, I was not prescribed medication, because I my mother had already experienced, the world of holistic health, so she kind of like said, "Focus right now on other things, then we can go into medication." And I also was like, "Okay, if at the very least I could try it." So, I went to a therapist and I did stuff with him, but at the same time, like, I continued to have this condition more and more and more. Um, and on top of that, just eating unhealthy, I was feeling terrible every single day. It developed into maybe sophomore year, which, by the way, this is during COVID. So, there's a whole bunch of other emotions that come from COVID, and people are getting anxiety just because they were experiencing COVID. Meanwhile, I was experiencing this plus COVID. So I was also in a terrible place, socially, and things like that. So eventually, again, luckily, my mother's a dietitian. So she would send me videos, very, very often, of different influencers online that would be promoting different strategies to not just recover from mental health, but also, really not even mental health. It was all food related, and it had nothing to do with my anxiety or OCD. I thought that was just, unfortunately, I thought that was just the rest of my life, something that I would deal with. And I came across some of the online doctors that would talk about metabolic health, not for mental health, but for just physical health. And at that time, I was like, might as well try something. So I started to follow a diet that wasn't at the time keto yet. It was just very simple, basically just, eat meat and vegetables and that's it. And at the same time, I ended up cutting out carbs as well, just without even realizing it. I ended up avoiding fruit, even fruit completely. I avoided fruit. I wouldn't eat a single fruit. Um, and eventually over time, I can get into like that specifically more, but eventually over time, that I lost all the pounds I had, maybe around 70 pounds within the span of only a few months. People were genuinely asking me in high school if like I was okay or if something was wrong with me, even though I was not okay months before and nobody noticed it. But only when I started to lose weight, people started asking me like, "How are you losing weight so fast? Are you okay? It's like your mental health okay?" And I was actually thriving at that time. I was starting to feel better every day. As they were asking me every day if I was getting worse, I was actually feeling better every single day. And eventually I lost the weight. And with the weight, I mean, all of the symptoms I had before from constantly checking my breath, my heart palpitations, my panic attacks, all of that disappeared right off the bat. And it was an unintended side effect of doing that. And so eventually I started to really look into keto itself. Luckily, doctors like Dr. Berg were very known for that. So I'd watch his videos, I'd follow some of those strategies. And I just ended up being keto naturally and doing the keto diet along with, I mean, I tried other diets like carnivore as well. I used to test things very well. I used to test like all these different, I used to test myself very well. I used to take a bunch of vitamins. And all of that really, at the end of the day, brought me to a place where I am today, where I'm able to talk, I'm able to communicate very well without feeling nervous. I'm able to feel happy. I'm able to go through my day normally. And it's all thanks to these things that I applied. There was other strategies as well, but this was like the bulk of it. As a high schooler dealing with other problems beside my physical and emotional health, like dealing with school itself, being asked every day by your teachers if you're okay when you were not okay for months and they didn't even realize it, but suddenly now you are okay. And every day they're like, you're losing too much weight. Like, are you okay? And the other factor to this is also I mean, like I looked overweight, I looked unhealthy, and when I was overweight and unhealthy, people would know that, but they wouldn't necessarily discount me for that, but they would mention it, very, like, subtly. But when I was losing weight, people started to tell me, like, "You were fine before, why are you losing weight?" And it's like, I was not fine before. And it's their perception of what is healthy, even though, because I was always a very jovial kid, and this is something with mental health is that you can be very jovial, happy, not really show what you're feeling, and yet still be suffering without anybody realizing it because you put on a face. It's just a really big part of mental health. Another huge aspect prior to going through these changes, when I was actually having anxiety and OCD, is that a lot of people at the time didn't really recognize what I was going through. And so I really, really thought that there was a stigma around mental health, like very, very prominently in high school. And when you start experiencing mental health issues amongst your peers who are, a lot of them might have mental health issues, but they're not like, I mean, the severity very differentiates depending on the person. So mine, which was really, really bad, where I couldn't even deal with my day, is not as bad as my friend who might just have something very simple. He doesn't even realize he's having it. And so they would look at me like, what is going on? Like with this guy, if the ones that really knew me, they would realize something was going on and it would be very weird. And now you can't navigate your classes. Now you can't navigate your homework. I remember an assignment I had where and I've always been a very good student. I always had all A's and I was always doing well. And during this time in high school, I remember an assignment where I it was a very simple homework assignment. Like, high school assignments are easy, but it was like freshman year assignment. It was so simple. It's like one page of writing something for an English class. And I remember going to my mom and like just throwing it in the air and saying, I can't do this. Like, I just can't even handle it. And even though the assignment was easy, I was good at school. I just didn't even want to look at the page. I couldn't even handle it because of how bad it was. And the other experience is also, I mean, seeing your mother and your father as a young person go through this with you is another factor that just makes it feel worse because if your mother and father, their entire life depends on their child. So when they see their child going through something so painful, and so confusing because mental health is it's so abstract to a lot of people. So when they see these things coming from also a cultural household, they're Arab, so it's like this is not really normal for them. When they see these things, they're experiencing this even more painfully than I was maybe emotionally. And I was watching my mother experience it. And I remember a time where a family friend told me, "You love your mother, so why don't you just, like, kinda hide what you're feeling?" And that was, like, such a painful thing because, I mean, maybe that wasn't true, but I would feel that same feeling like, I shouldn't suffer in front of my parents because I see them suffering just as much. My mother's the type of person that, like, completely stopped eating when she saw me experiencing these things. So now I have to deal with the experiences of my mother, my friends, all of these different things, my teachers, my schoolwork. Like as a child, it's very, very hard to experience mental health. And then it's even harder when you start to go into a keto diet, which the keto diet and a lot of these healthy diets nowadays have a similar stigma to mental health in that there's so much information, misinformation online about these things that when the typical person sees them and hasn't experienced it themselves, which again, I didn't even do it because I wanted a keto diet. I just did it and it was naturally what my body wanted. But if a person's thinking about the word keto itself and they're thinking about like based on seeing what I was going through and oh, he's not eating fruit. Why is he not eating fruit? That's such a nutritional thing. So they would look at me so weird. And that would now reflect I was not only suffering from the schoolwork, I was not only suffering from the way people saw me at the time dealing with things, but now I was suffering with the impressions of others that were seeing me after the fact, seeing and witnessing what was happening to me. Now, the really amazing thing is that after I went through all of this, after I lost the weight, after I felt better, after I at the time I started up an initiative called Free the Bird where I talked about my mental health very openly. And all of these coming together, along with my own health journey, everyone around me, my peers, my family, their opinions shifted completely. Now, I would say that all my friends are, like, completely aware of keto because they've seen me go through it and they know it. I've talked about it so much to them, I can never stop talking because of how good I feel. And I've reached a point where not only have I recovered from the conditions I was feeling before, but I've surpassed a lot of my friends who didn't even have those kind of conditions, but, they had something else where, they might have pain every now and then, they feel tired after meals, they feel sluggish in their day. I mean, these are experiences that everybody's facing, whether or not you have anxiety, OCD, whether you have bipolar or you have just simple stress, you are going through an experience that is probably tough for you, but can be solved if you just learn how to apply simple strategies. And I think after experiencing those things, after I reached the threshold of like, enough of them just being able to say like their words at me and say, "How are you doing this?" But them actually witnessing my experiences is when they also started to realize and also learn from me. And that's an amazing thing. And I remember someone once told me, once you do it, it's so amazing that like everybody around you sees it and can't, and once they try it, they can't go back. And it's just a ripple effect. So this was really a journey from my freshman year to my senior year. The senior year is really where it culminated and I really like took off and lost all the weight and everything. But it was a journey along the years of trying different things on my own, even without my family knowing that really and all these experiences that really ended up with it being solved. But the more and more and more I applied these strategies, the more and more I applied what I had learned over the internet because I had done so much research. I have literally downstairs right now, I just moved from my parents' house to my house and I brought in like two entire boxes of books and all of them are related to health because I would just read through all these books and learn these strategies and I would consume them because I felt like I needed to. And as I was applying each thing I would learn and even a sentence from one book and another book, as along the years, as I would do it, everything changed for me. I mean, I was a good student, but once I had reached the point where, my anxiety, my OCD, and, also just my health sluggishness and the way I felt before that, all of that, once I started to apply these strategies, a lot of that reversed, and I felt even better than before I suffered these things. So, like, my mental clarity was through the roof. I was so on top of my game. I mean, there's part of the reason that like I in high school started an initiative for mental health because like I just had so much drive to do something and I had so much like in me that I wanted to keep speaking. And I did not grow up as a public speaker. I did not grow up somebody that was naturally attuned to going and speaking in front of people. But after going through all of these things, my personality shifted completely because now I was just so free that like nothing bothered me, nothing stressed me out. And it was an amazing thing to go through. And people noticed it. People saw how happy I was, how free I was, how much confidence I had. And an interesting thing is, I think I had so much confidence and so much energy in high school that it might have even been so annoying to some people. And they didn't even realize it. Like that's why I was that way. It's just because I had no stress at all in my body because I felt so free. And a lot of that came from just at the end of the day, even though I read all these books and taken all this information, it was really just becoming a human again and living like a human again that just made me feel free and normal. I've had a lot of friends that have dealt with mental health, and obviously because I experienced these issues and I also recovered pretty well from them, I would also very much see my friends going through things, then now coming to me and telling me very openly, "Oh, I'm suffering from this. What do I do?" And a lot of the time, the first thing is they are told to go to a psychiatrist, which obviously, having faith in the medical system is something probably helpful for some people in certain conditions, but they would always think to go to psychiatrist. And when they go to the psychiatrist, they would be put on medication immediately. Um, not everybody, but some psychiatrists would jump to that first. And I would always fear for that because I didn't do that. And I know that my mindset, thankfully from my mother, but also just like the way I felt at the time. Also, even my psychiatrist had like the idea was if I don't have to take it right now and I could try something else, why wouldn't I? Because we know the outcomes of medication aren't always positive. Some people go through medication and have even worse side effects. My dad, for example, had a very small amount of like health anxiety, and he was put on medication. And as a result of the medication, he actually suffered medical consequences. So you don't need to try something you don't need immediately. If as a worst case scenario, you're really suffering, maybe that's something you discuss with your doctor. But if there's something that you can avoid, you can try a strategy that is very known, and this is becoming something very known. I think that's the best thing is to first try it. The other thing is, and this is part of a lot of the work that we do now, is that a lot of these strategies and the reality of these things is if you have to think about a human being. A human being should not have anxiety. A human being should not have OCD. A human being should not just have bipolar. They should not experience these things as just being a human. And a lot of the messaging nowadays has made it seem that it's just normal and that, we these are just normal conditions, even religiously, people tell me that like, God just gave this to you, so like, deal with it. And a lot of the time I think that humans are supposed to be creatures that have their body regulate itself, and we should not just have anxiety and OCD. So if you realize that and you recognize that, and then you think about your own life and you think, okay, I eat a bag of Takis every morning. I know people that do this. I eat a bag of hot Cheetos for lunch, or I never even eat, nutritious meals. I don't really eat meat. I avoid meat a lot of the time. That's what people say. Or they don't even have any vegetables, or they don't even try to eat good things. And also, they're just eating a bunch of bad things. So forget about the good things. They're just eating everything bad, and they're living lives that are sedentary. When I was losing the weight, I was also walking 10,000 steps plus a day. I was also doing things like I was doing high interval training. Just like this was just stuff I did for fun. It wasn't even under any like strategy. I just did it. And those, if you think about it, are just natural human things. Like a person back in the day would not sit in their room all day. I remember there was a study done on, I believe, mice, where they put mice in a cage for a very long time, and they didn't like give it all of the things it needs to thrive. That mouse started to not eat anymore. It started to go towards, like, I believe, sugar. It started to go towards all these bad things. And humans are in a cage as well. Like, I'm in a room right now with four walls, and if I wanted to, I could just lay in my bed all day, scroll on my phone, and never leave, right? And I could just DoorDash things, like, which this, by the way, I'm describing my own experiences. Like, this is stuff I've done, and this is stuff my friends do. This is stuff that normal people do. And if you think about it, that is not human. Like, yes, we're human beings, but those are not human. That's not how humans lived before we were given so much abundance and luxury. And if you go probably literally to any other country in the world other than the US, maybe the ones that haven't reached the same industrialization, that haven't also been affected by the US, because we affect a lot of countries. And you look at the people there, they might be suffering from other conditions, but they're definitely not suffering from the ones that we're suffering from here, which come from being in these cages of rooms that we live in. My project's name was Free the Bird. Because I felt like when I was suffering from anxiety, this was the main feeling, was I felt like I was in a cage. I felt like I was stuck. And my thought process at the time was, if I speak about my experiences and I talk about it and share it with others, even though I was suffering and not fixing it, but like that's what I felt like. People I also would see online, like, you got to speak about your experiences to feel better. So I would speak about it, and I was definitely still in the cage, but I was feeling comfortable in the cage. The cage became comfortable. And nowadays I'm realizing that, I was trying to free the bird the wrong way. The right way is actually to get the bird out of the cage and figure out why was he in the cage in the first place. And that is something that luckily we're working on today. But at the time I was definitely not doing that. And so just trying to get myself out of that cage, trying to and tell my friends, like, if you just try and figure out that you are not living like a human being, like, it's very simple. If you can just get out of the cage of thinking that the current modern society has put you in, and realize that, like, you are literally in a cage of unhealth from just not living like a human being. I mean, yes, my friends are like, I'm very athletic. My friends that tell me that they're healthy but are still suffering, like, oh, I'm very athletic. I play sports, and I try to eat healthy. And it's like, okay, you play sports, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're still living like a human, because when you're done with that 1 hour of sports, you go back to your room and you spend the entire day in your room. Another huge thing that I find like so important is that I tell them, if you wake up in the morning, what do you do? Well, they wake up in the morning, right? Maybe their blinds are open or not, right? So they're getting sunlight in. And so then they walk downstairs, they eat their breakfast, maybe cereal or whatever. Even if they don't eat breakfast, they get in their car and they go somewhere and they enter another building which is full of light. And first of all, windows are literally like these windows that we're used to also completely filter out the light that we're supposed to be receiving. So that cortisol spike that we're supposed to have as human beings, within the hour of waking, gets delayed hours and hours and hours. Then we take in sugar, and that just makes us crash. So we're feeling garbage all day, and our bodies, which are literally made physiologically to be just human beings, are not able to be human beings. And so now we're experiencing anxiety. Now we're experiencing OCD, and now you want to give medication to something that is literally also out of balance. And I feel like it's just, if we're able to just be human first, maybe if we're doing everything right and there's some circumstance, then medication is possibly some kind of good intervention. It could be. And I know that it has helped some people, but for the most part, I mean, if you're not living like a human, why would you try that? Try to be human first. Like, it's about being human. And I think I love that word. Like, we are human and our bodies physiologically know what to do if we just give it the right inputs.